Welcome back, everybody. Before we begin to take a look at the essay, let's first just kind of talk about encountering a text, right, or annotating a text. This is similar to the video we shared, the story of an hour. Of course, here we have the printout. One thing that I always like to do is go through and mark up the text, mark up the story. I like to use different color highlighters and pens for each reading I go through, because when I read, it's like an iteration. It changes. I see some things on one reading, and then I go through and read the story again, and then I see new things. So that's one thing I always like to tell folks is when you're sitting down to write a paper, this is actually part of the pre-writing process, encountering the text. You want to go through it multiple times. So what did I see when I went through and I started to read the story, right? I noticed here with the setting, I thought this was a really important sentence. On every side it sat like a lid on the mountains and made of the great valley a closed pot, right? So I'm just jotting down notes, right? That was the setting. We get the setting early in the story. And that hinted to me, right, pointed to me of isolation, how the fog is pressing things down. They're in a valley. They're physically isolated. Then we have the fog. It's like a lid on a pot. And that called to mind with me the imagery, because remember the purpose of this essay is to select a literary device and then show how it's used to develop the story's theme, right? So we're starting to see that, right? So I could use imagery, because if I have the lid on the pot, if there's a lid on a pot, then that's going to help it to boil faster, to cook faster, right? So that's an interesting idea there, that sense of pressure. We have early, right, the first paragraph of the story. A lot of people, they just go, okay, we're in California, and they miss things like that. Be a slow reader, be a careful reader. Moving through, notice I'm just going through, circling, identifying different characters that we encounter. And then here we have a great paragraph. This is our first look at our main character of Elisa, right? And I've highlighted here her clothing, right? Her figure looked blocked and heavy. A man's black hat pulled low down over her eyes. A figured print dress almost completely covered by a big corduroy apron, heavy leather gloves. Wow, why is that such a good paragraph? Well, it calls to mind something, right? So here we have Elisa, the wife of Henry, and she's covering up. And a lot of people say, well, hey, Mr. K, yeah, she's working in the garden. A lot of people wear gardening clothes. Yeah, I get it. That's just on the literal sense. So underneath here, we have some figurative language going on that helps us to understand Elisa's character. She's covering up. What is she covering up? Well, let's look at what she's wearing, right? She has gloves on, a man's hat, a big corduroy apron that's covering up her dress. And if we were to look at her from a distance, we might even think that she's a man. Now, that doesn't mean anything crazy, like that she's cross-dressing or anything like that, but she's covering up her femininity. It's a really interesting idea. And you'll notice that not everything is marked or highlighted, because when we're going through and we're writing a paper and we're analyzing a piece of short fiction, we want to avoid plot summary. What is plot summary? Plot summary is just what happens in the story. That's not as important as why it happens. That's what we want to uncover and we want to analyze. Okay, so just going through and reading in the story, describing things, right? What do we have going on? Well, she's in her flower garden, right? There's the wire fence that protects the flower garden from the cattle, the dogs, and the chicken, because that's where we live. We're living on a farm, living on a ranch. And that's the literal, right? We need that fence to protect the garden. What's underneath there? This is the stuff we have to talk about, right? She's what? Fenced in. That sense of isolation. Oh, wait a second. Have we possibly uncovered a theme to the story of isolation? Yeah. And as with most pieces of short fiction, of fiction, we have multiple themes. Being isolated. She's fenced in, a fence. That's a barrier. Wow, that was good. Then, here we go. We have the first interchange between husband and wife. And this is really interesting. Okay, so Henry, the husband, comes in. They have a little interchange back and forth. You'll note the author says there's a little smugness in Elisa's voice. And listen to what Henry says. You've got a gift with things. I wish you'd work out in the orchard and raise some apples that big. Response, maybe I could do it too. I've got a gift with things. So, right, invitation. Hey, I wish you could work out in the orchard, and if you've got to, right, make some apples. Ooh, maybe I could do it. Listen to this. Well, it sure works with flowers. Ouch. That hurts, right? There was the invitation, right? Acceptance, and then boom, closed off. Wow. And immediately after that, look what we have. Who were those men? What's underneath this interchange of dialogue? The men of women versus the world of man. We have this, right? Have this going back and forth. How do we see it? Could this be, yeah, this, right? Isolation, barrier. She's fenced in. She's physically kept away from the men, right? Then we have the peddler coming. Okay. We have the description of the peddler. Nice stuff here. And then, what do we have going on? Right, so we have the peddler talking, where he says, I go from Seattle to San Diego and back every year. It takes all my time. I aim to follow nice weather. That sounds like a nice way to live. What is this? A life of freedom and independence. What is that? That's a nice way to live. Well, what does that say about Elisa? That's what she's lacking in her life. She's lacking freedom and independence. Wait a second. Could this tie in with these ideas that we're starting to work with? Yeah, that lets us know that we've uncovered something. We need to keep things rolling, right? Okay, so then, right, the peddler wants some work. So what does Elisa do? She rejects him, right? No, I don't have anything for you to do. Right? She tells him again and again, 4 rejections. But the peddler, so right, I'm making little notes here, is very cunning. Very cunning. That might be an idea for a character analysis. Then he mentions her flowers, right? He's very smart. He sees that she's working in her flower garden. And then the second he mentions, oh, your flowers, what happens? She blooms. She takes off her hat and she shakes out her dark, pretty hair. What happens? Wow. Somebody shows interest in her, and then she blooms. And then we have something really strange going on here where Elisa's talking about how to take care of her chrysanthemums, what is referred to as planting hands. And you can go through and read this paragraph again, this interchange between a man and a woman who've met for the first time. And then what is she really talking about here? And yeah, it's not flowers. That's not what she's talking about here. And then, right, so what starts to happen? We have that interchange. Her breast swells passionately. Wow, what's going on? What do we see? I've never lived as you do, but I know what you mean. Wow. Then that a sense of appeal again that Elisa had with her husband Henry that was rejected. So now appeal to another man, and what do we have here? Another rejection. Oh, I feel just so sad. Right? What do we see on this same page? I wish women could do such things. What does she want? Freedom. What does she want to? She wants to escape. Escape from what? Barriers and isolation. But what does the peddler say? It ain't the right kind of life for a woman. Another rejection, another reminder. You're a woman. You have to stay in your world. I'm a man. I get to have my world. What is my world here? Is full of what? Freedom, movement, right? Oh. And right, reminds her again. Yeah, another rejection. And what happens when he leaves? Listen to what she says. There's a bright direction. There's a glowing there. In that one sentence, the same word is repeated, there. Not here, but what? There, there. Why does Elisa keep repeating that? Well, she's isolated. She's enclosed with barriers. Then what happens? She starts to change, literally and figuratively, when she goes in to get ready for the night out with her husband, Henry. This is a troublesome marriage, right? There's something brewing underneath here. What could be brewing underneath here? You'll note, what did I have earlier? Well, the fence literally protects, right? There's cattle, dogs, and chickens. They got everything on this ranch, on this farm, but there's no children. For whatever reason, whether it's because of Henry or Elisa, there's no children. That helps us to understand, perhaps, why Elisa was reaching out literally as well as figuratively to the peddler. Then as the story starts to wind to a close, what do we see? That gift of Elisa, something that could leave the valley that she's prohibited from doing. What does she see? Well, that pot of chrysanthemums that she prepared for the peddler, he dumped out the chrysanthemums. Why? Why would he do that? That's not nice. Well, he'd have to care for them. He might not be able to. Plus, he can sell that pot on down the road, right? If he kept the pot. Why is this significant? Well, Elisa is prohibited, right, from leaving. She cannot escape her barriers, and not even her flowers are able to escape. So what we're seeing here is we're seeing some repetition. When you see this happen within a piece of fiction, that's letting us know that we have encountered a theme, something to work with. So first part of pre-writing deals with encountering a text. Read it multiple times, mark it up, annotate it just like we did when we were working with a poem. So then we go through the writing process. We do some pre-writing, jot things down. We do some outlining. We work on our thesis, our main idea. We want to have supporting quotes, always important, always got to have that. And then we pull things together to look at an essay, and that's what we'll take a look at in the next lecture.